While we sleep, the guardians of the night take to the streets, having said goodbye to those they love. Each other knowing they may never say these words again. They face the evil that we run from. They dedicate their lives to those that would hate them because they wear the badge. They wear the badge not for the glory or recognition, but for the passion to help others. This is the LEO First Podcast. We'll talk to the men and women in law enforcement, those that have retired, those that keep the prisons secure, and anyone who's impacted by law enforcement. We'll peel back the curtain, and you'll get the real stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Every law enforcement officer has a story to tell. Get ready to hear from the men and women who put their lives on the line every day for their communities and their country. Welcome to the LEO First Podcast. Now, here's your host, Michael Laidler.
Hey everybody, it's Michael Laidler, host of the LEO First Podcast, and welcome to another show where we have the opportunity to not only have a great guest on, but see how people live on a day-to-day basis. I know so many times in this world, in our society, and just this profession that who we are as people gets lost in the moment. Next thing you know, we have everything else controlling our time, everything else controlling every moment of whatever we're doing. And the LEO First Podcast, it's designed to slow those things down so you can see that myself and the guests that I have on here are just like you. And if you find yourself in a situation where you don't understand what's going on, hopefully these shows will give you an opportunity to learn about a person. I can tell you about our guest today. I actually met him virtually several months ago through another mutual colleague. And when I heard about what he was doing, then followed up and read about it, I was like, you know what? This is a guy I need to meet. This is a guy that is at a level that I'm going to be at one day. Not yet, because I still have a full-time role that I don't want to leave because I love it. But when I looked at what he was doing with his company, I was like, you know what? This is a person that can be a mentor. This is the kind of person that a lot of us as entrepreneurs, business owners that are also in law enforcement, we strive for because of what he's doing. So I connected with him. We had some great combos, and then some time passed realistically. And I was like, you know what? All these episodes that I had on this show, I haven't had him on yet. So I reached out to him again, and I dropped the ball, guys. I will tell you, Michael later dropped the ball. We were supposed to have this interview or this show a couple of weeks ago, and I forgot to send the link. I was like, yeah, hey, Ray, did you hear that? He was like, you never sent it. And I looked back, I said, oh, crap. So when we rescheduled, I made sure I sent it a lot quickly so I wouldn't forget. So I will say that this was obviously destined to happen, and I'm excited that it did happen. But you guys have heard enough of me mumbling and jumbling and all that good stuff. But on our show today, we have Ray Beshirs. He is the owner of Blue Shield Tactical Systems and a former law enforcement officer. So I don't get too deep in people's bios myself because I'd rather let them explain what's important to them. So, Ray, tell us who you are.
I appreciate the kind words to start with. Thank you very much. And, I'm glad that that you had us on the program or had me on the program for this. And I was 23 years in law enforcement. I grew up in Texas and Oklahoma. I grew up poor. I grew up in poverty. So law enforcement was a way for me to find a way out of that. And I was able to accomplish a lot. I was very interested in the training aspect of law enforcement after, several years of being in. I was very fortunate with my agency. I worked for the Haltom City Police Department there in the DFW Metro. And I was very fortunate with my agency to have varying jobs there within the department that helped me. I was a supervisor over internal affairs. I was also a supervisor on patrol. I worked as a crimes against children detective for 3 years. I was a member of the Tarrant County Child Abduction Response Team for that. And then I also taught at a police academy for approximately 7 years. I'm a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm a brown belt in Krav Maga. I specialize in use of force training for law enforcement and physical control training for law enforcement. Then also I've been in the documentary, it's called Wrist Lock, that's out there as well, that was put out on use of force within law enforcement and how that translates and how martial arts has a role in that. So I'm married. I've been married for Well, going on 23 years, I better get that right. Otherwise, my wife will make me pay.
That
But
she will, yes.
Oh, I know. And we don't have children. So I retired. I was able to retire from law enforcement at the age of 44 after 23 years. So I went to the police academy when I was 21 years old, got out when I was 22. Didn't. So I was very fortunate that I wasn't fired as well as a young officer, and that I did have some supervisors along the way that helped me out because I was just thinking it was, driving fast and shooting guns and doing all those kind of things that's what a cop was. And it was so interesting to me at that age. And as I got older, I realized there was a lot more to being a law enforcement officer in a community and really what it meant. And so, I decided to get into the training aspect of it. That was my passion. And so I really found that in the police academy too, teaching cadets, which is a whole new different thing, than teaching in service. But I really found a passion there for that and decided to start my own company. So I actually started Blue Shield. We've been in business now for over 10 years. And I started with $800 and I built my own website. I put everything together myself. And then I realized, this is not enough. And so all the money I was making from starting a business, which wasn't much, and we discussed that earlier on, that, being at a level that you can maintain your full-time job and still, work your company. And that's what I was doing to start with. But eventually it got to where it forced me out of law enforcement as far as working for an agency. But it was the right decision for me. And I've been able to, I think, contribute so much more. We've been able to contribute so much more because it's not just myself. There's approximately 12 of us that teach with Blue Shield, and I try to keep everyone, and they keep themselves at a high standard as far as what we provide. And if they don't, then they don't teach with me. They don't teach with the company, and it's that simple. If we're not all moving, it's like, I always look at it like a dog sled, right? If not every dog's pulling their weight in that sled, then we're not going to get where we're going. And so it's the same thing with agencies and the same thing with companies. If everyone's not on the same team and everyone's not going the same direction, then it's going to be difficult for us as a whole. So, yeah.
It's well, you said a lot of different things. I'm going to touch on probably all of them if I can.
Sure. No
but
problem.
Towards the end, as you started to talk about your company, one thing that, and you and I talked about it, you gave a great example of it when we talked a couple of months ago. You talked about the quality control of instructors. And when you're building this brand and you're building this company, one thing that sometimes people fail to realize is their brand is very important to being successful and continuously being impactful, especially in law enforcement, because if you haven't never taught or instructed in law enforcement, we can be very tough on each other. And if there's a particular instructor that misrepresents your brand or whatever that might be, people are going to talk about that a lot more than the other 11 instructors that knocked it out the park. They're going to talk about that one instructor that may have got you out early or had a 3-hour lunch break or only told stories that were irrelevant to the actual content of the program. So for you, at what point, and it might have been always in your business, at what point did you decide that the quality of the instructors was going to be much more important than the quantity of instructors?
I learned a lesson actually from it. It taught me a lesson early on. I had an officer, an instructor, had a lot of accolades and received, recommendations and everything else. We brought him on as an instructor, had everything in place. Everything was going great. Sent him to an agency that we had a good rapport with, and we had taught there numerous times. And it was like you said, he went there and he gave him an hour and a half lunch and let him out at 2:00 in the afternoon. It was supposed to be an 8-hour class. And I was contacted by the training coordinator. My fault. I'm responsible for it. And, he sent me an email and said, "Hey, I can't give him 8 hours for this." And I said, "I don't blame you. I wouldn't expect you to do that." I said, "Let me contact the instructor, figure out what's going on and go from there." Well, come to find out, he just, he went a little too fast with his program and he got finished early is what he said. And he said, "I'll do better on the next one." And I said, "No," I said, we just can't have you as an instructor based on that, because it reflects on the rest of the instructors. It reflects on myself as well. So what we did when we found out that happened is we reimbursed every student that came to the class. And I sent an email to every one of them, letting them know that it's my responsibility, that does not reflect what we do as a company. And this instructor will no longer be with us. And that's the right thing to do under those circumstances. At least I feel like it is. Now, because we're not at the point as a company to let people grow as instructors. Yes, they have to be at a certain level and they can grow from there.
Correct.
But I can't bring someone in that's going to not have at least a passion, to have a self-interest in themselves, to want to put out a good product, because you represent yourself when you go in front of law enforcement officer, anyone in any company. And, you're right. It doesn't take law enforcement long to figure out the BS, should I say, from individuals. And so if you're passionate about what you're doing, you really care, then I think it really transfers over to the students as well.
And that's a great word to use when it comes to instruction, because one thing that I found myself doing over the last 2 to 3 years is not just on the business side, but teaching instructors how to instruct. And one of the first things I tell them literally when it comes to presentation skills is you have to believe in what you're speaking on. And once you do that, you're going to find that passion to become better. So, for example, like the instructor you gave the example on, he wasn't a bad person. However, somewhere down the line, he lost that passion, or he lost that motivation, that dedication, whatever word you want to use, to realize that, hey, first off, if you run out of time, you gotta get creative. Like, you got to say, well, I know I have 2 hours left. You better put them on a 10-minute break and create an activity. You better find something to do. But that also comes with experience as being an instructor too, because I know, Ray, if you're like me, sometimes we may have run out of things to say, or we may have forgot to hit a point. And once you gain that experience, you learn how to bring it back. You learn how to say, okay, you know what? We didn't touch on this in hour 2. Since we didn't touch on it, we're going to take this time now to highlight it, because I want to make sure you don't miss it. And the way we're going to highlight it is by doing this particular activity. So when it comes to being a passionate instructor, I think that's important. Having a belief in what you're saying, and it really helps with quality control.
Well, it's also just saying that, I made a mistake, guys, and that's the other thing too. There's nothing wrong. I tell them, I teach instructors all the time, and I tell them there's nothing wrong with saying I made a mistake, because you're a human being. They're human beings. We're all going to make those mistakes in class. We're all going to make those mistakes in our program. That's why it's like I use the training manuals. I wrote the training manuals for the classes I teach, but I still bring the training manual with me, and I use it as a guide, because if I don't, I'm going to forget. I'm at the point in my life, I go downstairs and go into the pantry to get something and forget why I went into the pantry to get it. And then I come back upstairs. My wife says, well, weren't you supposed to go down and get that out of, didn't I ask you to get me that? And I was like, I forgot, so if I can forget that quickly, just walking into a pantry, then it's easy for me to forget a topic or something a bullet point that I'm supposed to touch on in that program. So if you do, it's just, just saying, hey, you know what, I made a mistake. And it allows those students to realize, we can speak up in class too. We can make a mistake. And now he's not going to crucify me in class or make fun of me because I made a mistake. And that's how we open those lines of communication, and that's how we grow as individuals, and that's how we grow our officers as well.
Yeah, I haven't been to any presentation where I've heard, especially for 8 hours, a perfect instructor. I haven't. I've heard guys and gals that were 9 out of 10s or 95s out of 100, but there's always something, either a misstated up a word, or maybe a brain fart, maybe an issue with technology, and just realizing it that, hey, you know what, I messed up. Like once again, going back to that one instructor, obviously it wasn't his goal to give a bad performance to be bad at what he did. He mismanaged his time, and he should have even maybe phoned a friend, like, hey boss, I kind of ran out of things to say. Do you have any suggestions? But that comes with maturity. That comes with understanding, hey, you know what, you're not going to be perfect. How do you get better? So, I mean, it's one of those things that I did while we're talking about it. I laugh because I take my lesson plan, the one I built for my presentation, I take it with me all the time. And sometimes I've had some of my friends come and they're like, didn't you write the presentation? And I'm like, yeah, but I like to at least go over my notes. It's like, you've given it 30 times. Why are you? I said, it's just part of my method, because I want to make sure I don't miss anything, because I know I have, whether it's 30 minutes or 8 hours or whatever, 3-day training, that's the time I have to impact those people that I'm teaching. And I don't want to fail because I didn't prepare correctly. So even though I taught the material 10 times, even if I wrote it, I'm still going to practice it because that's the passion I want to bring to them.
It's because you care about what you do and you care about the end result of it. And, it's like I say in agencies, there's a lot of officers in these agencies that have an instructor certification, but how many of them actually teach? There's the key. And how many of them are actually good at teaching? They want it for a resume, some of them, or it sounds good to be an instructor at the time until they get in front of people. And then they realize, oh, this is not as good as I thought it was.
This is tough. This is hard.
Yeah, this is tough. And it is. And I agree with that. And but the key is picking yourself back up, because guess what? I've been knocked down in front of people. I've been embarrassed in front of people, and it's okay. And I learned from it. And I'm glad that I got that experience, just like I got the experience from the new instructor I told you that didn't perform the way I wanted to perform. So what did that teach me? Now I fly out to every instructor who we're looking at bringing on, and I go and see them present. Good. And then that way I know what kind of product I'm getting. And so if it's someone that fits into our group and is going to do a good job and has the same goals and aspirations that we do, then yeah, we can move forward with them and they're going to be a great asset. But, like I said, again, there's those ones that think that, hey, they contact us all the time and they say, hey, can we just teach what you teach? I was like, well, we already have people that teach what we teach. What can you bring? What can you bring to the table?
Right.
What can what curriculums do you have? What have you created as an entrepreneur, as a young officer, as a young instructor wanting to come into the field of teaching? What have you done to establish that sector for yourself? And so I really encourage them to go back and take a look at that and say, okay, on my knowledge and experience, what kind of curriculums can I write? What can I create that's fun, interactive, and entertaining for the officers? And I kind of say it's kind of like that movie 300, right? Where he's standing in the arena and he raises his arms. This is an instructor to a certain degree. And he goes, are you not entertained? Because they should be entertaining. As an instructor, you should be entertained. You should have you should have smiles that come on people's faces. They should look forward to the next statement so they're happy, the next part of the program. When they walk out into the hallway, they should want to talk about it, because that's how much they're enjoying it. That's how much they're engaged. And we should all aspire to do that. And sometimes I hit the mark and sometimes I miss the mark because I'm even being,
Yeah. So, and you never know. Every audience is different. That's what people don't realize. You can go to an agency, let's say you have 400 sworn officers right now, and you can knock it out for 7 out of 8 classes that you did for them. That 8th class, you could just bomb it because you don't know the audience makeup, because you know how it is, Ray.
Oh yeah, you can't please everyone. Trust me. I've been trying for 23 years. I please my wife pretty well, but I don't make her happy all the time. And I always tell them as well. I tell the students that we teach. I said, new instructors want to go around constantly in the physical aspect, because I teach a lot of self-defense aspect of law enforcement instructor courses, and they want to go around and correct constantly because they think that that's what it means to be an instructor. I have to be making corrections. And I told them, I said, first you have to establish a rapport with these people. Even though they're your agency, you still have to establish a rapport. So instead of going around and constantly correcting, how about going around and saying, okay, good job. I appreciate you being here, and work first just to establish a rapport. And then we can make those corrections. And it's a lot easier to do that. It's kind of like, I always give the example. I said, if you wanted to go out with the boys next weekend, right? And you're a married man, you want to go out with the guys next weekend, you would take your wife out the weekend before and you make a deposit in a love bank. Right. So you would wine her and dine her the week before. And then you would remind her as it's getting close to that weekend coming up. Hey, I took you out last weekend. We went out for dinner. It was great. And we had all these things. But now I'd like to go out with the guys. I said, so, if you have the relationship and the rapport built in there, it's easier to bring up those topics later on with them. I said, so instead of just going there and feeling like you got to correct constantly, how about going in there first and trying to build a rapport with them and let them know that you're there to support them. You're there to make them better. And I said, then they're more apt to open their ears and listen to you a little bit more about what you have to say.
Well, I could tell you, Ray, you're definitely a seasoned instructor, because it takes a lot of instructors time to understand about the relationship side of teaching. And
sure,
you have to make that connection extremely early. And sometimes it took me, it took me a while to realize that too. I mean, last couple of years I've understood it more, but if you're not establishing that relationship, even if your content is amazing, it's harder for people to comprehend what you're saying.
Well, not everyone's at your level as well. And you have to realize, especially when the physical aspect of it, there's so many agencies, and I've talked about this many times, there's so many agencies that still don't even have a physical fitness requirement, much less a standard when it comes to defensive tactics and use of force training. And so how can we expect good results from these individuals if A, they don't have the physical ability to be able to do these things, and then we provide them with something that's overwhelming to them that is not the basics of what they should learn. And then first, like I said, building that confidence level. It's like I tell people, I think I can go get a 10-year-old child to walk in there and regurgitate techniques. That doesn't make you an instructor. What makes you an instructor is realizing there's so much more than just technique. And that is building, like I said, again, a rapport with not only with your frontline officers, but also with your administration and what their goal is and what we're all trying to achieve together as an agency. And then, and the community, because where are they getting their information about use of force and what your agency does? It's not just being on Facebook. It's actually going out there and establishing programs to teach them about what the why of law enforcement. It's like Harley Davidson. They really established the why of Harley Davidson. That's why people go around and get Harley Davidson tattoos on their bodies, because they created a culture that people want to be a part of. And so it's the same thing in law enforcement. If we create a culture that the community feels like they're part of and the officers want to be a part of as well, then we're creating success.
So I want to jump back a little bit, and
Sure.
this, like the note, and this, because for me, I know this was part of the reason where I'm at today, and it took me some time to realize this. You talked about your very first, and we're going to get back to the community and building up,
Sure,
making knowledge. But while this is fresh on my brain, like I said, that's cool. Once again, best part about having a podcast that's conversational, that we're having a conversation. It's not scripted at all. So, but I took a note earlier, and when you got into law enforcement, you got into it in a similar method that I did, in a sense of you grew up from nothing. You grew up from not having anything, and then you found an industry that you were passionate about and you got into it. How do you think that kind of upbringing has kind of shaped you as a person today?
Well, I think that strife in your life creates resilience, and I'm a firm believer in that. And I was very fortunate, and like I said, I came from extremely humble beginnings. At 17 years old, I was basically homeless, and I had to go to work, and I gave my parents money because they were homeless as well. And when you come from that, it builds strength in you, and determination, because you have to have strength and determination. And so I was very fortunate that I had a couple of guys that was in law enforcement that I met as friends, and they introduced me to that because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted to be. When you're 17, 18 years old, 19 years old, man, you don't know what you want to do.
No.
You don't know what you really want to be. You don't even know about life yet. You're just trying to figure everything out to hopefully I just, I don't embarrass myself and embarrass my family. And, you're just trying to figure out what direction to go. And for me, I didn't want to do the same thing every day. I didn't want to go into a job where it was monotonous and it was the same thing. And I didn't have the education level either. I didn't have a degree, so I didn't know, hey, what is out there for me? When I found law enforcement, and especially now, you look at what law enforcement's paying and what some of these larger cities are putting out there. It's really a great career, and it's a great opportunity for so many of these young people that may be fresh out of college, fresh out of the military. And it really has a lot to offer. I mean, for me, it gave me what I have today, and I'm so grateful for that. And I was able to impact lives along the way. And because when I walked into some of those homes and I saw some of those kids in those situations, I knew what it was like to be in that situation because I'd been there. I knew what smoke-filled rooms was like, because my mom smoked cigarettes when I was a kid. I knew what food stamps are like, because I was on them when they had to look like an actual bill. It wasn't a card. You had to go into the store and hand it to a clerk, and say. And I was embarrassed about it as a child, and I had to hand it to a clerk and say, here's I want to get some candy or whatever it may be. So it really shaped me into that. So I can have a lot of resentment for it. I don't. Because it really shaped me into the person that I am today. And maybe if I didn't have that in my life, maybe I wouldn't be where I'm at today. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
When it came to my own self-awareness studying it, I just started, actually, I'll be quite honest. I just started actually realizing this about the last year or so. I used to always look at my self-awareness issues and some things that I face when I put the uniform on. So even my book, Greatness Beyond the Badge, most of it starts off as me being a police officer. But as I dove into my own life a little bit more, what I started to realize that before I even put the uniform on, I was already going through trauma. Just like you, being 17 and homeless isn't something, it's not what an average person goes through. It's not what people are designed to handle. And the fact that you were working and then giving your parents money, I mean, that's not, to me, that's not what we're designed to do naturally.
No,
we're not designed to raise our parents when we're
Sure.
a teenager. And that's what you were doing. So at an early age, which obviously you may or may not have realized it back then, but you were actually going through traumatic events that were starting to shape you into obviously who you are today. But for me, that's what I try to go back, and I don't harp on those times like you said. I don't maintain resentment based on things that I've gone through, but I do recognize some of the things that have happened to me. So when I'm dealing with other people, I have that level of empathy. Like you're talking about going to smoke-filled rooms or dealing with food stamps. I mean, that's things that if you haven't gone through it, I'm not saying my son won't ever go through it, and I don't want any of my family to, but it's something that you don't look past because you know what that feeling you had back when you did go through it. So for you, as you have grown continuously, do you see that as, or could you see that as kind of like a point that may be beneficial for other maybe officers to know, like, hey, if you had a bad background, it's okay, grow from it?
Sure. Yeah. There's a lot of kids out there that could have they hadn't been in trouble. And I was very fortunate I wasn't in trouble as a kid, even though we were poor. But they're living in those poor neighborhoods that are looking for an opportunity. And going into law enforcement really provides them with the benefit of helping their local communities and growing a career at the same time and feeling confident and great about themselves. That's the good thing about it. You get to look in the mirror. You get to put that badge on. You get to put that uniform on that looks sharp, and people respect you. And you walk out there and you realize, I can make a difference. And when people come up and they say, thank you for what you did, I mean, that's worth it. That's what did it for me. It's not the certificates I got. It's when I realized that little child, that especially when I worked crimes against children, I made a difference in their lives. Then that was the turning points for me. And I was very lucky that I had several of them in my career. But yeah, those kids out there that are looking for an opportunity, law enforcement can offer that to you. And I would really recommend taking a strong look. Don't let the media influence your decision. Don't let social media influence your decision. Look at what's best for me. Hey, go for a ride along. That's what I always recommend. Go out there and talk to the officers that are working at the department, saying, hey, how are you liking this career? Is this something that you think is beneficial? And it might be eye-opening for you. At the same time, you might realize you'll have a lot of fun too as a law enforcement officer, because you never know what you're going into. And I really like
You're right. Hey, Ray, I tell people all the time, I was like, I've had people on the show talking about some of the things that they experienced. I had one guest, I'd have to look back at my notes, that I think her first night, she saw a double homicide. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, that is definitely a way to kind of pave the rest of your career. I was like, that's definitely the point that you don't want to see right out the gate. But like you said, Ray, you don't know. Like, that's when that call goes out, or let's say you're working in a prison, you hear something on the radio, like, you don't know what's going to be said. And law enforcement does give you that opportunity to kind of just be anywhere.
Yeah. One of the things I struggled with, a year or two after retirement, when we're talking about these things and building yourself and how it affects you, is they really don't give you a blueprint for when you retire. And I noticed, for me personally, I didn't realize the struggle that it brought on me. But when you get up for the same time every day for 23 years and you go and put a uniform on and you go to the same location and you have the same rapport with your fellow coworkers and the things that you've built there with them, not when you separate yourself from that, you don't necessarily, separate yourself completely from law enforcement. You want to still have that connection, but it's life-changing. It really is. When you realize I no longer have that part of myself. There's no blueprint for that. And I struggled mentally with that when I retired, and it caused depression for me. It caused a lot of things in my life, and I'm now getting to where I'm getting past that. And but for me, it would have been nice to have someone to be able to talk to that was already retired and say, hey, you know what? Here's the struggles that I'm having. Here's the things to expect. the expectations of, and then the financial aspect of it too, because some people, they realize when they retire, hey, I got to go back to work doing something. I'm very fortunate I'm still working, but there's some of them, they realize, you know what,
right.
I've got to get back into something because I can't just sit at home either. Yeah.
So Ray, since you were very transparent with us, I'm going to ask you another question now.
Sure.
Since you and obviously I know you're very open about things. So you said you, after retirement, that first year or two, you struggled. You went through some depressive states. How did you eventually, how are you managing that? Because I think that you recognize it, which we want everybody to recognize, that this can happen if you go into retirement. Maybe you don't have things lined up that the last 23 years you did. But what have you been doing to start managing that and coping with it and starting to move yourself into a more stronger mindset?
Well, one thing is being more open with my wife about what I'm experiencing.
Oh, good answer. Good answer.
Yeah, and having a conversation with her. If I wake up in a bad mood, because there's times I wake up in a bad mood and I don't even know why I'm in a bad mood,
Right.
and I'll tell my wife. She'll ask me, she'll know something's wrong, or I'll tell her. I'll say, hey, I'm just not feeling it today. But then I tell myself also, I've gotten to the point where mentally, I tell myself, this is going to pass. This too shall pass. So just have a better mind. Just smile. Just look in the mirror at myself sometimes and just smile. And realize, even though I'm feeling bad right now, that if I just smile at myself and realize, hey, if I give it to after lunch, let's see how I feel then. Let's give it to this tonight. Let's see how I feel then. Let's give it to tomorrow morning. Let's see how I feel then. So it's just short little goals throughout the day that I'll set myself and remind myself that, hey, I feel a little bit better. And just try to keep a positive mindset. And then, having friendships too. Keeping those friendships with some of those people that are still within the agencies and outside of law enforcement as well. That's what people, I was very lucky with martial arts and Brazilian jiu-jitsu and those kind of things, that I was able to establish friendships that were outside of law enforcement. But yeah, open those lines of communication with your wife, don't or your spouse, and tell them, hey, what's going on with you, and that way that you can discuss it together. Because my wife retired a couple of years after me. And then she started experiencing the same things because she was a school teacher for 29 years. So she started experiencing the same things I was experiencing, except for she didn't tell me, because I'm actually more verbal than she is, which is really surprising because normally it's the other way around, right?
Yeah,
It's the male is not as verbal, but I'm actually more verbal than she is. And so I would talk to her about it. And I said, hey, if there's problems, you're thinking something, let me know, because I know how it is. I'm feeling some of those same things. And so I think that's very important. It's like I tell the new officers sometimes, and I tell this to new people or young people in general. I say, anytime you're looking for a partner in life, look for someone who's on the same playing field as you. I said, has the same goals and aspirations, has a career, has something that they're working toward, has a retirement. Because that's why some of those young officers, and unfortunately in our line of work, we have a high divorce rate. And some of those officers, if they don't marry someone that's on the same playing field, may end up after a 25-year career now having to go and work again because half of their retirement is now gone to someone else. And we have to look at that anytime we're establishing these things, But yeah, good relationships and being able to open those lines of communication, I think, is the key to it.
And it's crazy because back when, you started sometime before I did. But well, you started 4 years before I did. Looking back at your resume, you started in January of 2001. I was January of 2005. But it's like we kind of talked about open communication and relationships back then, but not like seriously. And now we are seeing it nowadays, and the industry is starting to come around. But it's crazy that we have to tell ourselves that, you know what, you have to find that person, especially the right person, that's going to stick with you even through the thick and thin. Like, for example, you're in law enforcement for 23 years, married for 23 years. So your wife has seen a lot. She's seen the highs and the lows. You coming home from a bad day of work and you getting excited about doing a training class. Like, she has seen it all.
Sure.
And you have to have that person that's on the same page. So was there any point that you found that it was extremely important to know that, or did it just hit you? Was it just over time, or was there like a moment where you're like, you know what, I really need to be talking to my wife more consistently?
I think, well, with age comes wisdom sometimes, right? and I think that I just realized over time, especially like I said, when you're at home now 24/7, because I work from my home as well. and my wife works with me now. So we both work together all day long, and so it's easy to get on each other's nerves. It's easy to have an issue there. You could take two best friends, which my wife is my best friend, but you could take two best friends and put them in a room together, and they're going to argue eventually. They're going to have some disagreements about something. So it's just how we disagree. There's the key. It's how you argue with anyone. And, I haven't always been good about controlling my emotions. And sometimes I've struggled with that. And, but I've gotten better and better at it. And it's the same thing with my wife. I don't like going back later and apologizing for my tone or those kind of things. So I've gotten better at trying to lower that down when I'm speaking to her about something that I'm not happy with. But yeah, it just comes with wisdom. And plus my father told me too, he gave me a lot of wisdom as well, because he was married. My mother and my father were married, I think about 60 years, so quite a long time. So he gave me some pointers. Yeah, he gave me some pointers. Yeah, he gave me some pointers along, and they had problems in their marriage too, but he gave me some pointers along the way. And I think, anytime that you're struggling like that, speak to someone who's been in there, been in the game for a while, been in the marriage for a while, and they can probably tell you something that's going to benefit you.
So it's not. So you're saying it's probably not a good idea to ask your friend that's been through 3 marriages and don't even have a girlfriend or a significant other right now for advice. That's probably not a good idea, is it?
It's probably about like Googling what's wrong with you. You're probably going to realize by the end of the time you read what's on Google that you're going to think you're going to die.
You're going to find something that meets the criteria that's going to have a whole bunch of symptoms.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But, man, Ray, I was watching. What was I watching the other day? I don't know what I was watching, but a commercial came on, and they were talking about some medicine. And by the time they went through the symptoms, I was like, I'd rather just have whatever the disease is at this point. They literally, I usually don't watch a lot of TV, like the commercials especially, but it was like 15 different side effects or possible side effects. I was like, so what do you say? Like outside of death, I didn't hear death. They said everything else. Like literally, I was like, why am I going through? Why am I going to suffer through all of this?
Yeah. I don't remember all these pharmaceutical commercials when I was growing up. And of course, the TV went off at midnight too. But I don't remember all these type of commercials. But yeah, you're right. Some of the side effects with some of them is worse than what you have. I would hope that at the end of the day that they're going to give me something that's going to make me better. But that's why it's practicing medicine. And we're practicing law enforcement. We're trying to get better at it. Yes. Everyone's trying to get better at whatever their career is. And, there's going to be some things, mistakes along the way, should I say.
Yeah. And there's no problem with that. It's like you said, and it took me, and unfortunately, I just don't have to take medicine for anything at this point. But when I hear like people being prescribed medication, I've heard doctors say, well, try this for 30 days, try this for 90 days, but you better make sure you better take this with it. And like I tell people, it's literally practicing. It's an art. It's trying to figure out what works, what doesn't. And since everybody's processes things differently physically, then you don't really know until you try it.
One of the speaking of that in the medical industry and in law enforcement, and kind of those two together, one of the things that kind of blew my mind when I went out of law enforcement, I retired. The city, when I retired, wanted $825 a month for me to stay on their health care coverage, which I don't know how people afford it. And then you have your family. That was just for me, and that wasn't including my wife. And so I just, what I have discovered too, sometimes it's just better to go in and pay the cash price. So now I just always ask them. I remember, for example, my wife needed an MRI, and they said through insurance it was $1,200 out of pocket on our end. And they said, but if you come back at 9:00 at night, I don't know if I was getting a backdoor discount, but that's okay. But if you come back at 9:00 at night, right, that and you pay $300, that you can get the MRI for $300. And I was like, man, see you tonight, 9:00.
Yeah, yes, like I don't even know what is the debate at that point. Like, I'm going to save $900 by waiting a couple hours. Okay.
Yeah, and matter of fact, there was even a bill that was introduced not too many years ago that was going to have it to where law enforcement at age of 50 was eligible for Medicare, Medicaid at age 50 for retirement. Now, I don't know where that bill went. I can imagine it went to the wayside, especially right now when all the recruitment, they're trying to keep people in law enforcement.
Right.
So I got a feeling that would have been a big deterrent, and a lot of people would retire after that. But things like that, I think, are useful to law enforcement, and I hope that some of our politicians will bring that back up eventually for some of our law enforcement officers and military personnel, obviously. But they have TRICARE, so.
But it's crazy, and that's some things that people don't realize, especially when you're younger, or maybe you're not experiencing any health ailments, to maybe you're out of law enforcement, that healthcare matters. Healthcare is
Oh
very
yeah.
important to understand, and that's why I tell people. People were like, "Well, I like some people like, hey, I'm going to be an entrepreneur," and they say, "Well, why are you still in law enforcement?" I said, "Well, I hate to tell you, but in law enforcement, when you're actively in it, at least most agencies and organizations, your health care is going to be very well. Now, the pay may
Sure.
not be there as if you're in the private sector, but if you go see a doctor, if you're on some kind of government type of insurance plan, your copay is going to be $300 versus $1,200. I mean, and that's what
Right.
people don't understand, and that's important, like you said, especially when you have a family, to look at all those numbers.
But I tell you this, and we're talking about paying law enforcement right now. I think it's better than it's ever been.
I agree.
Uh, and now some of that money is coming from other areas of the city, and from training, and I'd hate to see that, but it is better than it has ever been. And now, I see people all the time. They're commenting on social media, and they're saying, "Well, what departments are hiring?" I said, "What departments are not hiring?" There's the issue. I mean, you could go to almost any agency you wanted to now. And now I don't know how some of these smaller agencies are going to be able to compete with some of the sign-on bonuses that are being offered by some of the larger agencies. Those kind of things, moving expenses, and Texas DPS, and I'm out of Texas as well, in Fort Worth, but Texas DPS now, it's not uncommon to make over $100,000 a year
No,
working
it is.
for Texas DPS,
Right.
and then if you add in off-duty jobs and those kind of things, it's just so much to look forward to right now in law enforcement. And someone who was looking coming straight out of college, man, that it really could open a lot of avenues for them right now, especially if they got in at this point, to be able to promote up the chain of command to become a detective, do who knows what within the agency. And there's just a lot of opportunity, I think, for a lot of people. So I really hope that our youth, because we need them, will move into law enforcement and criminal justice. And I really want to see that, because we're going to have a breakdown of our society if we don't have our youth really wanting to make a difference in coming into this career field.
Ray, you are 100% right about that. And what I will say, and what I'm learning, and obviously studying just management, leadership, organizational leadership, whatever you want to call it, is where smaller agencies are going to win. They're going to win based on their culture.
You're right.
Because they cannot compete financially. Let's call it what it is. Let's say, for example, Dallas PD versus Tomball Police Department. Like you're going from a couple of thousand sworn to maybe 6. So the way you're going to keep officers in your organization is by creating that culture to where they want to stay there. Because is it worth them making an extra 10 to 15 grand if they're going to hate their supervisor or the people they work for, or stay where they're at and love what they do? So, and I know those are things that I know you bring up more than likely throughout your presentations, is the reason why we do all this training is because we want people to understand how much we appreciate them, because
Sure.
we could easily assume that they know everything. For example, like even the training that you offer from Blue Shield is you're offering things to help people advance themselves. For example, the de-escalation training you guys offer, that's to help people get better at their job. You don't have to offer that. You could just say, you know what, get your 40 hours of in-service every year, doing your driving, shooting, report writing, and maybe do 1 or 2 scenarios and get back on the streets. But there is a place for a company or smaller agencies to kind of steal those officers that might be going or looking for incentives. It's like, well, you can go make 10 to 15 more grand there, or I can build you up here and make you a better person. And I think that's the challenge, because it's not for example, your de-escalation training, you're not going to usually see immediate results. You're not going to say, well, I learned how to de-escalate on Tuesday. On Wednesday, I'm going to de-escalate 80 people. It's not going to usually be that captivating. But over time, when it comes to the measure, like, okay, over the last year since I've been through Blue Shield de-escalation, I've been able to avoid this, which ultimately led to a no litigation there, no lawsuit there, no bad use of force. So we have to get to that culture side of slowly building the people that we already have in our organization. Because for me, I think it's more important to retain versus recruit. Only reason is because your people are already there. They're already signed up to be with you. They already know your values. Keep building them up and growing them from the ground up and allow them to go through their ranks internally.
And I saw some of the same things as a supervisor in an agency, that there's times that an officer would be there 15, 20 years and they would say, oh, well, we're going to give this job opportunity over within the agency. The guy's been here 4 years. And I said, well, I understand that there's nothing wrong with that. The guy that's been here 4 years is a go-getter. And I understand that. And I agree with you that they are. But the guy that's been here 20 years was also a go-getter at 4 years in. But now you've burned him out. You have him on patrol for 20 years, and now he doesn't feel like he has any other opportunities. And then now he's getting bored with the job itself. So if you give him an opportunity, him or her, to move into those spots, then maybe you'll revitalize that officer and get them back interested in law enforcement, because you can have a change of career even within your own agency by just moving to a different position. I noticed that, and that's why I was very fortunate. I was able to be a detective for 3 years. I worked in crimes against children. I was a supervisor over internal affairs. I did patrol. So I got to rotate into those different positions, and it really made a difference in my life and my longevity of my career as well.
Yeah, and it's crazy when you say it like that. Like, it's hard for, I think sometimes, for people to realize how important it is to build internally. But like you said, you had that 20-year officer where he's just fed up. He's like, I have nothing coming, so I'm just gonna go jump to the next paycheck.
Sure.
And it's why. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that agency didn't offer anything, but more than likely they probably didn't. I mean, realistically, they probably said, well, we give you a check every 2 weeks. You should be happy with that. And some people have that mindset. But Ray, as you know, since everybody's hiring in the country now, you can't have that mindset. I was reading an article. Where was it at? And you may have, somebody shared it. It was an article from Cleveland, Ohio. And this was about 6 to 9 months ago. And they were talking about the difference in sizes in their academy classes. Like, they said, like, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, they were consistently having classes of 50 to 60 people with the wait list. But now, over like the last year or two, they're lucky if they can put 20 people in there. And it's not, and the money's not gone. It's not like they can't hire more, as they're not getting the applicants. So you have to look at what you already have and figure out how to change that narrative of, hey, you know what? At 20 years, I want you to know that I've given you everything we can give you in a good way. We're trying to keep you here, and we're trying to keep you well-rounded.
Yeah, and the other thing I'd recommend for those agencies is, the Police Explorer programs, things like that, where you get them in high school, you get them at a young age to where now you can get them interested in law enforcement. Or becoming a public service officer. You get an 18-year-old kid who now he goes out and he takes a report for code calls where there's no suspect there, and he learns about what it is to be a law enforcement officer. So by the time he becomes eligible to become a law enforcement officer, now you can easily move him from that position into the ranks by putting him through the academy, or developing him along the way to where now he's really something that you're really is an asset to you. Because if you have a 21-year-old kid on a shift, and I was that 21-year-old kid, you need a lot of supervision. you need a lot of, you need a lot of supervision. And I was that. And it's like I told kids, it's like I tell them when I teach class, I said, how many of you have driven fast to an alarm call over the speed limit, and those kind of things? And I said, so you get a couple of them raise their hand up, and I'll raise my hand, and I say, I was that kid. I said, I didn't have a supervisor that would call me in the office and say, listen here, I'm not here to chastise you or anything else. I'm just here to talk with you and let you know that if you get out there and you drive 20 miles an hour over the speed limit to an alarm call, and you slam into the side of a family and you kill them, in this environment, they're liable to prosecute you.
That's real.
So I'm trying to help you in your career and with your family not to have that issue. So if you just listen to me and work with me here, we can move together, and I'm going to grow you into a better officer, and you're going to help me be a better supervisor. How about that?
Yeah, keep it simple. I mean, It's a process, but I think that's where programs like yours, programs like mine come in, because we're trying to get people in those conversations more often than waiting till something happens. It's like, hey, let's start mentoring in the academy versus waiting until 10 years when we think they're eligible. Or, you know what, I'm not talking to you, rookie. You're still a rookie for the first 5 years. No, those days are over. Those days are those 10, 15 years ago, because you start doing that now. And that's where you start losing that officer, because that next agency, they're probably going to say, you know what, you're not a rookie. Maybe you're 10th in seniority, although you have 2 years in, versus being 100th in seniority in 2 years. And now you have that person that's being uplifted by that next place. So in your current role, your current agency, you have to look for ways to help people understand their value early versus them getting ready to leave. And now you're trying to pull them back in.
Well, I tell you this, for those supervisors that could be listening to the podcast as well, if the last time that you ever had it, when's the last time you told your officers good job?
Mm-hmm.
Think about that. When was the last time you reckon? It's like I was talking to someone, and they said, well, I asked them, I said, did you say good job to them? And they said, well, all they're doing is coming here, showing up every day on time. They're doing these things. I said, that is a good employee. If they show up on time and they do the things that you want them to do, why wouldn't you recognize that? Why wouldn't you want that behavior to be repeated?
Yes.
It's not difficult to figure out. So the mentality of the hazing that goes on in some agencies is a thing of the past. You're not going to retain your personnel. You're not going to keep them there, and they're not going to be happy to be in that profession because of the interaction they're having with their supervisors or even their fellow officers. And it goes back to culture. What are we wanting to set? What kind of standard are we wanting to set? I recently watched and I'm going to pick on him a little bit, an officer out of California, and he was talking to some protesters, and he pulls up his phone and he starts playing Taylor Swift on his phone as they're recording him so that they don't put it on YouTube. And I said, well, what kind of message does that send? How about we have some dialogue? How about we have some conversation, even if we don't agree? How about we talk to them instead of doing something like that? Because it puts a bad taste in people's mouths, and they look at you and they go, yeah, look at that. That's the kind of behavior that I'm talking about. That's not what they want. They want you to open up those lines of communication with them. And at the end of the day, you still may disagree, and it's okay. That's why we're all Americans.
Most people, even when they seem like they're upset or don't want, they truly just want to be heard. And they want you to have some kind of two-way communication with them. Even though it doesn't seem that way, I can tell you, and Ray, I know you're in the same boat. We've talked to a lot of different groups of people, especially in training environments, and you hear all over the country what people are going through. It's not just a Dallas-Fort Worth or a Beaumont or a Miami, Florida. People have things going on all around them, and 9 times out of 10, if you open that line of communication, like you're saying, Ray, like, hey, tell me what's going on. There are a lot of times they're just going to say it and just leave it alone because they already got it off their chest. Just like us as people, like we like to explain what we have going on. And a lot of times once we say it, all the energy we had up here, we say it and we're like, okay, like in your marriage, I mean, you've learned that, hey, sometimes y'all got to work through things. And once you work through them, you're like, okay, let's forget about it and keep moving on. Because if you don't, then the hostility builds up and you got that pressure that shouldn't be there when all you had to do is say, tell me what's going on, or how can I help you? And that deflates a lot of situations.
Yeah, if you care about your marriage, and most of these officers, they care about their marriage, they care about their interaction with their spouse. Why wouldn't they have that same care and that same passion about having that interaction with that officer? I remember I had a time, and I'm not perfect by any means, and trust me, my wife will tell you that one as well. but I remember I was speaking to an officer, and I told him afterwards the particular thing that we were talking about. As a supervisor, I was speaking with him, and I called him up later, and I said, you know what? I said, I wanted to apologize. I said, for the way that I interacted with you. Mm-hmm. I said, because I could have done a better job as a supervisor. And the officer that I was speaking with, they said, well, you know what? I appreciate you calling me and telling me that. And they said, I appreciate you. And we're still friends. We're still friends to this day, even though I no longer work there, and they no longer work there. They're another agency themselves, but we're still friends because our interaction, I was able to admit when I made a mistake. For instance, I had one that I was supervising for records division, and she kept coming in late to work. And I brought her in the office, and I said, "Hey," what's going on?" She goes, "Well, I have to pick up my kid in the morning." So I said, "Okay, well, how about you come in 30 minutes later then, and then that way it should solve the problem." Well, it didn't solve the problem. Well, I called her back in, and I said, "Hey, what's going on now? We were not able to show up on time." And she says, "Well, anyways, at the end of it, about 2 weeks later, I come in, was the point behind it. I come in late about 2 weeks later. And she's watching me after we've already had this conversation about her being on time. I come in late and I sit down on my computer and I CC'd everyone I supervised along with my captain. And I said, on this date, I was late to work. I said, I wanted to let you know that I wasn't here on time. And the reason I did that, how can I hold those other people that I supervise accountable for their actions if I don't hold myself accountable for mine? And so there's the key. We can go to a class, you know that, about leadership. We can get a certificate. We can go get a de-escalation certificate as well. We teach that. But if you don't want to implement those things on the street, what's the point? If you don't want to implement those leadership qualities within your agency, what's the point? Why aren't we doing it? So there's the key for me. And I want to see that, and I want to see some accountability going on, because we all can agree that change needs to happen in law enforcement. I think we all can agree, and we're seeing it happen, and it's going to take time to implement. But at the same time, let's point out when we're not meeting the goal, when we're not meeting those standards, and let's see why we didn't meet those standards, and then make those changes within this. Let's don't just keep moving those same leadership to those different agencies that are toxic, that are not doing a good job, and expecting a different result. It's not going to happen. Let's get some new, younger leadership in.
And Ray, I trust me, you know me, I'm definitely supportive of what you're saying. I mean, that's why I have a company. That's why you have one, because we want to help agencies learn about that accountability side. And are we perfect? Are we the masters of? No, but we do know some stuff. I mean, you never know some things. We've been knuckleheads too, and we're like, hey, we're just trying to keep you from running your head into the wall like we did. That's all we want to. Yeah, I got enough notches on my head. I bad shoulder. I already have all that. I don't want you to have to get it too. But you're right. It starts off with understanding your role and how to keep yourself accountable. So, as I mentioned before we started, Ray, I wanted to stay within a time frame because I know I respect your time. There's so many things that I want to talk about, but if I bring it up, it's gonna be another 2 hours just based on the questions I have in my head. But in the meantime, until we meet again and we get on, because one thing I told people before that I want to start doing is start having having 2 or 3 guests on at a time more often, and kind of getting that dialogue going on between multiple people, because I think that's important. And I think it's just the contrasting perspectives that people really enjoy. Until that episode comes up and we get that time to do that, where can people find you?
They can visit us at blueshieldtactical.com is our website. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn as well under Ray Beshirs. But yeah, visit our website, see what we have to offer. We don't charge you anything to host any of our trainings. We provide free slots for hosting our trainings, just like most of the other companies that are out there. We don't filter our reviews. So go online, take a look at our reviews for our courses, and you'll see that what we're doing is good work. I think that I have a lot of respect for our instructors and what they're able to accomplish, and I'm very grateful for the team that we've built.
Yeah, and I can tell everybody listening, if you've ever instructed anywhere, if you instructed more than one person, you may have 1 or 2 complaints that didn't go your way, or 1 or 2 evals that didn't go your way, and it's fine. Because at the end of the day, if you gave it your all and you gave it good content, good stories, good energy, then you did your part. Because you don't know where that person's at in their life when they sat in your class or they were evaluating you, because you never know people's situations. So I know, Ray, just based on what we've talked about, my dealings with you, some of the things I've seen on your LinkedIn, particularly because that's what I'm usually on. Definitely, you're out there. You're out there providing feedback. You're out there providing quality information and content. So the fact that you were able to grow your business to where it's at over the last 10 years, obviously you're doing something right. So folks, audience, people that are listening, if you want Ray, if you're trying to figure out more about him, like he said, you got this website, you got IG, you got Facebook, you got LinkedIn, you got just type in Blue Shield Tactical or type in Ray Beshirs. I'm sure scrolling that first page of Google, you're going to find something. So make sure you reach out, and if you're looking for anything he offers, then please do. Also, instructors, if you're good and you have a topic that Ray doesn't teach, I mean, that might be your chance. This may be your opportunity. You're like, you know what? I've been thinking about this content that I developed, not that Ray developed, that I developed, that may be helpful and might fit in the mission of Blue Shield. Reach out. I mean, you just never know, because at the end of the day, I think all of us that are entrepreneurs, business owners, we want to see our business grow to levels of high quality where we can reach every officer. I think we all have a goal to try to reach everybody if we can. We know it's not scientifically probably not possible, but if you can at least have that aim, you'll keep raising yourself to that level. So Ray, what final words do you have?
Well, the other thing I like to say is, I want all of you to stay safe out there. And even if you don't ever come to any of our courses, if you ever need anyone to talk to, if you ever have any questions about some of the subjects that we've talked about, if there's anything that I said today that made an impact for you, you're more than welcome to reach out to us. I'm a human being just like you are. And at the end of the day, we talk about thin blue line in law enforcement. Well, we should really mean that. We should really want to support each other in such a way, because, you're my brother, you're in law enforcement, and those the brothers and sisters that are out there. And I hate to see you struggling, and I hate to see the issues that you may be having. So anytime that we can help, don't hesitate to reach out. That's what we're here for.
You all heard it. Make sure if you have anything, you need anything, you're just curious, maybe you want to question him. I'm sure Ray has no problem getting into debate with you about anything he talked about, because when you're passionate about what you do, you have no problem talking about it to anybody. And if you do feel that way, reach out. He's an open door, guys. Hey, because at the end of the day, we want you to learn. He wants you to learn. We want to make sure that you don't go assuming something and then making a bad decision when you could have just asked the question and got the answer. Don't put words in our mouth. Ask the question and we can directly give you an answer, and raise that guy that will be more than happy to provide you with the answer based on his experiences and his knowledge. I mean, that's all you can ask for out of a person. Ray will fit that. So thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching. As usual, as always, I want y'all to stay safe. I want y'all to be fulfilled. I want you to look at your life as another amazing opportunity that you just got this chance to wake up and be on this earth. So if you need anything, reach out. If not, then just keep doing what you're doing to stay positive. Thank you all. Have a great night, great day, whatever time you listen to, and we'll get you on the next show.
You've been listening to the LEO First Podcast. Michael has been in law enforcement since 2005. He's worked for 3 law enforcement agencies in 3 different states. He's a professional speaker who travels the country teaching about leadership development and self-awareness. And he's the author of a book called Greatness Beyond the Badge: The 3 Key Principles for Self-Awareness. It's Michael's passion to bring law enforcement members' stories to the front, so you get the real and raw take. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with Michael on YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Michael Laidler. On Twitter at Michael A. Laidler. On Facebook at Michael Laidler Leadership. Send an email to michael@michaelalaidler.com and hit the website at michaelalaidler.com. See you next time on the LEO First Podcast.